The ballroom at the Belmont Grand Hotel shimmered with gold accents and polished marble chandeliers twinkling above a crowd dressed to impress. Waiters moved with military precision through clusters of socialites, offering trays of champagne and amuse-bouches. Laughter echoed, light and calculated, the kind reserved for rooms where names mattered more than faces and every smile was a transaction. At the center of it all stood Meredith Langston, draped in a red silk gown that clung to her every curve, diamonds dangling from her ears, her platinum hair pulled into a sleek bun that screamed old money. People knew her from luxury property ads, political fundraisers, and gala planning committees. When she whispered, people listened mostly because she made sure they did. As she sipped her Dom Perignon and scanned the room, her eyes landed on an elderly man seated quietly near one of the large floral centerpieces. He had dark, copper-toned skin, silver hair, and wore a modest but clean black suit. He sat straight, composed, eyes fixed ahead, hands folded in his lap like he was there for something far deeper than oysters and donor spotlights. Meredith tilted her head, then leaned into the woman next to her. "Who let the help sit at the guest tables?" she said loudly enough for nearby conversations to stutter. A hush rippled through the area. A few guests glanced over, saw the man, and then quickly turned away again. He didn't flinch. If he heard her and he definitely died, gave no sign. Just sat there, still as stone. Meredith wasn't done. "It's a black tie gala, not the staff lounge. Doesn't the foundation screen these lists?" She clinked her glass and took another sip, smug. A younger woman across the room, Evelyn Ross, overheard. She had just arrived, a successful nonprofit attorney known for her unfiltered principles. She looked at the man, then back at Meredith, then at the man again. There was something dignified in how he sat, something deeply still, like an anchor holding against the current. Meredith went on, "I swear, ever since Allison stepped down from organizing, the standard has gone downhill. First it's off-the-rack suits, next we'll be handing out plastic forks." At another table, an older gentleman in a tux muttered, "Maybe you should worry more about what's in your heart than what's on someone else's hanger." Meredith blinked, for once unsure whether she'd won or lost the moment. Meanwhile, the man she mocked slowly reached into his inner jacket pocket, pulled out the evening's program, and unfolded it in his lap without saying a word. He didn't need to speak. His stillness said it all. His name was Henry Beaumont, but no one had asked. 30 years ago, Henry played piano in New Orleans jazz clubs under the name Hank Keys. Back then, his music poured out of him like water. But after Hurricane Alicia destroyed his home, he and his wife moved to Jersey with nothing but suitcases and their toddler son. He found work wherever he could, nights in warehouses, early mornings sweeping high school hallways. Eventually, he landed a custodial job at Ridgeway Children's Hospital. He stayed there for 32 years. He was never late. Never once called out except the morning his wife passed away. Even then, he called in to apologize. Most people at the hospital never learned his name. He was the quiet man who changed ceiling tiles, handed lollipops to siblings in the waiting room, and left coloring books in exam rooms without being asked. He hummed jazz tunes when kids were scared. He fixed flickering lights so they wouldn't disturb anyone's sleep. Tonight, most people still didn't know who he was. But someone did. Standing near the bar, Patrice Ellison, a retired nurse who had worked with Henry for nearly 2 decades, spotted him. Her eyes lit up. "Henry?" she whispered, gently tapping his shoulder. He turned and smiled. "Miss Patrice." She hugged him tightly. "You still got that jazz hum, or did you trade it for a rocking chair?" A few people looked over. Most didn't think twice. But some of those who heard the earlier comment began to connect the dots. Patrice leaned over to the table behind her. "That man," she whispered, pointing to Henry, "used to come in early with hot cocoa when the heat broke in the pediatric wing. He used to fix wheelchairs during his lunch breaks. Quietly. Never told anyone." "No way," one guest muttered. Patrice nodded. "He did more for those kids than half the board did." It didn't take long for word to spread. Small whispers, sideways glances, conversations shifting away from designer shoes and toward the man in the simple suit who, just minutes ago, had been labeled help. At Meredith's table, she noticed the shift. She'd built her whole life on commanding attention, but now she was losing it and didn't know why. She sat straighter, tried to redirect conversation, but it wasn't working. People were turning. By dessert, the ballroom felt different. Quieter. Charged. Table 12 kept stealing glances toward Henry. At table 9, a man leaned in, whispering, "I think he used to work at Ridgeway." "You mean the hospital?" "My niece was treated there," another said. "He was there. Every night," Patrice added, her voice traveling further than she realized. And then the doors opened. In walked Dr. Miles Beaumont, mid-30s. Confident, polished. His suit fit impeccably, though he didn't seem to care. His presence caused an instant hush. Some people recognized him from press features. Board-certified cardiothoracic surgeon. Recipient of the National Humanitarian Medicine Medal, Harvard-trained. A man used to podiums. But this wasn't just any speech. This was his father's night. The MC's voice broke the hum. "Please welcome tonight's keynote speaker, Dr. Miles Beaumont." Polite applause followed. Some stood. Meredith quickly adjusted her neckline and whispered to herself, "Finally someone who belongs." Miles approached the podium, took the mic, and waited. "My name is Miles Beaumont. And before we talk about medicine, I want to talk about history." "My history?" A few heads tilted. He paused, then looked straight at Henry. "I grew up in East Newark. My mom died when I was 8. My father worked nights at Ridgeway Children's Hospital. Some of you may have met him tonight." He pointed. "He's sitting right back there." Silence. "My dad used to come home with cracked hands and soaked shoes. Still, every morning he'd quiz me on spelling words. Every weekend he'd read library books out loud even when he was exhausted." There was a shift in the room. People say success comes from drive and talent. But that's only part of it. The rest? That's built on sacrifice. On someone else doing the hard work while you sleep. He looked back at his father. "My father cleaned operating rooms so I could one day operate in them. He gave everything and asked for nothing." Gasps. A few people murmured. Then came the truth that hit the hardest. "Ladies and gentlemen, this man, Henry Beaumont, didn't just raise me. He's the reason I'm here. He saved my life long before I ever saved anyone else's." Not a word was spoken. Not a single clap. Not because they didn't care, but because they did. Meredith's face went pale. Her eyes dropped to her empty plate. The room she once owned had turned on its axis, and she realized she was no longer its center. Miles continued. "We talk about innovation. But the most powerful thing in the world isn't convenience. It's sacrifice. The kind that scrubs floors with one hand and holds a child's hand with the other." A tear ran down someone's cheek. A sniffle echoed. And then Miles stepped away from the podium, walked toward his father, and helped him to his feet. Henry rose slowly, composed. No theatrics. Just strength. A staff member handed him a second mic. "I wasn't planning to speak," Henry said. His voice was smooth. Measured. Calm. "But I'll say this." He looked across the room. "No accusation. Just clarity. There's no such thing as a small job. Just small minds who think value comes with a title." People shifted. Some exhaled audibly. "I mopped floors so my son could walk across them with confidence. I gave not because I had to, but because I could. And never once did I see that as weakness." Then he added, "Some folks see a man in a uniform and think that's all he is. That's okay. Because worth doesn't depend on who notices youths in what you build." And that was all. The room stood not in politeness, but in awe. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed her wine glass down. Later, she made her way toward Henry, her heels clicking softly. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly. "What I said earlier. I was wrong." Henry nodded. "I appreciate the apology. But tonight, you didn't just reveal something about me. You revealed something about you." She swallowed hard. "I know. Then do something better with it." She nodded and walked away, not shamed, but changed. By the end of the night, guests weren't just complimenting the speeches. They were asking each other deeper questions. About sacrifice. About who really mattered. About who they'd overlooked. Henry sat back down. His son beside him. They didn't need champagne, or flowers, or trophies. They had each other, and a room that finally saw them. A week later, the foundation posted the full speech online. It went viral not because of credentials, but because of Henry. People began sharing stories in the comments about janitors, nannies, bus drivers, mechanics, people who built legacies in silence. Henry never read the comments. He didn't need to. Miles read a few aloud over Sunday coffee. Henry just smiled and said, "Funny how people hear things clearer when the music stops." And that was the truth of it. The man who once mopped a hospital floor had become a lesson. Not in status, but in grace. And the room once filled with diamonds, egos, and noise had learned the quietest man often had the loudest story of all.